Testing, testing. Yes, guys, how are we doing? This is a first in a brand new series on production tutorials, production breakdowns, walkthroughs of some of my songs, maybe some other people's songs. We'll see how it goes. So for this first one, I wanted to break down a song of mine called In Your Arms, which I had out earlier this year. It's kind of like a garagey, housey R&B tune. It came out on Selected Records and it was received pretty well, I think. And a lot of you have been asking about how I made certain sounds in the songs, the approach behind the writing of the song, and this is going to be a complete entire breakdown of the whole project. I'm going to go through every single track and we're going to talk about the processing and all the good stuff that was involved in the making. So, without further ado, let me do this, and then we're going to go over here. Also, this is the first one of these that I've ever made, so bear with, there might be a few technicals along the way. But yeah, so this is the project here. Now, a couple things that we're going to just get situated with. So the tempo is 135 BPM. As you can see in the top left-hand corner here, this is Ableton, for those of you that didn't know that already. And so on my projects, I like to have both of the edits, or all of the edits, within the same project. It just makes everything a lot easier when it comes to making changes along the way. So we have the radio edit on the left here, then we have the extended edit on the right side over here. And today we will be breaking down the radio. We might go into some few bits on the extended, but this is pretty much the entire song over here. So, for those of you that don't know the song, I'll play a little bit of the song and then we can dive into it. So that's pretty much the tune. Right, so the first thing that I want to talk about is this drum group that we've got going on here. So with this song, there was a couple others that I had made previously in this vibe, kind of, you know, this sort of newer garagey sound. For those of you that don't know, I had a bunch of songs out sort of in the beginning of my career which were kind of in this vibe, and I've always enjoyed making this sound. And yeah, I wanted to do something in this tempo and in this vibe. So this was maybe my 5th or 6th attempt at making, I'm just double checking that we're recording this. Yeah, this is my maybe 5th or 6th attempt at making these sorts of drums. So it wasn't just like I woke up one day and had all these sounds ready. For those of you that don't know, you can do this thing on Ableton where if you see on the left hand side of the screen where my mouse is, you can add a folder of anything that you want, and I sort of dragged in, you can see it here, this 4x4 drums from another project, and tweaked a few things once I brought it in here. But pretty much this was kind of, all of these drums that you see here in yellow were already sort of made before I made the song. And I like to do that because it just speeds up the creative process a lot. You know, you don't have to start from scratch each time. It just helps with the creative flow. So at the top here we have this noise layer, which was literally a layer that I made in Serum. I'll just show you sort of how I made it here. And it's just literally a white noise sort of hi-hat layer. I'll play it what it sounds like. In context with the drum group, it sounds like this. Without it. So it just helps to add a lot of life to the song. The kind of a concept that we'll be talking about a lot with this one, is that I wanted it to feel, and especially the drums, to feel kind of organic, and all the sounds really. Yeah, so if I was to make this sound from scratch, I would have just taken this noise oscillator here, put it on bright white. I would have put this filter to a high pass, maybe around there. And I probably would have had this sort of envelope. I mean, maybe the filter was slightly lower. That was pretty much it. And then I just chopped the audio so it sort of started on on the beat. And as you can see here, I've done this transient mode on Ableton. For those of you that don't know, it just sort of maps it from this transient. I don't know why this is. Yeah, it maps it from all the transients here. Yeah, bam, 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 bam. So on all of those offbeats, it's sort of shortening it up to that point, if that makes sense. Like if I went really short. And that kind of automates, well, I did it manually through each section. So on the drops, all these shorter bits, it's at 45. And then on the second half of the drops, it goes to 64, just adds a little bit more release to it. And that has a hard curve saturator, just really sort of crunching it and making it a bit more beefy. Let me just get rid of this serum channel here. Then here we can see that I tried, there's this break fill that happens at the end of every 8 bars. It kind of sounds like this. And I originally tried this break here, which was okay. In context, that would have sounded like. It just doesn't have the same magic that this one had. This one just feels a bit cooler for some reason. I liked the swing of it, and I liked the fact that it went to mono, because all the other drums are in stereo. So it's like for that one bit, everything kind of goes down the middle and then back out on that last clap. And this break, I didn't actually do anything. I just turned it up 2 decibels on this EQ. Also, everything in this group is kind of going through like a bunch of other processing and soothes and stuff, which I'll get onto later. Then there was this hi-hat loop, which didn't end up making the cut. That was eventually replaced. That was kind of involved in most of the writing of the song, and then I ended up switching it out for this hi-hat, which just felt a lot stronger overall. Let me just double check. Yeah, cool. We're recording. Yes. That hi-hat was a Splice Mark Knight, like a Toolroom loop. And I just took that one hi-hat and shortened it manually, made it quite tight. And I added a boost of 4.59 decibels at 15.6K. Without it, it would have sounded like that, which was just really dull. So it needed some life. Then this one we have here is another splice loop. And I mapped it to, I think I'd already mapped it to the this groove pool, one of these two that would have felt right. And then I think it got frozen down in the process. I can't remember why, but I think it just, I couldn't tell you why I did that, but that's what we did. Then over here is another hi-hat that almost was used as the sort of off, like an extra hi-hat on this, from the second 8 of this first drop, and then all over that second drop. The one that's actually used is this one, just another big open 909 hi-hat. That was the original one that was going to be used, but I just felt like in context that other one just felt like it fit more snugly in the group. The other one was sort of a bit too dark for my liking. Yeah, and this one I pitched it up one semitone, added a bit of an EQ here, very subtle. Yeah, and I didn't do too much else to it. It's one thing that we'll be talking about is pitching of drums quite a lot, especially the ghost snares and stuff coming up. This clap here was again from this previous one of the previous attempts at making these drums. I remember specifically when I was making the drums from the other project, I went through maybe like 7 or 8 claps repeatedly, just maybe more, trying different ones. And this one I kind of kept coming back to, you know, thinking like, wow, this is the right clap for this sound. Looking back, I could have I haven't done a whole lot to this. There's a little filter on it, just chopping off the tiny bit at the top end. I've done some release editing here. I haven't pitched it down or up. I chopped out some low end. Quite subtle, but I mean, it was just felt quite muddy without it. So, looking back, I could have maybe, where was it? Here. Could have maybe tightened up the sustain. Debatably. I quite liked it where it is. Yeah, it feels full. So yeah, love that clap. Then we get on to these ghost snares. Again, you can see that I tried out something here. Just didn't feel like the right snare in the end. That got replaced with this one, which I've actually stolen from another song. I've just chopped it out of a extended edit. And I've pitched it up 4 semitones, which again, and with these sort of garagier snares, I like to, the concept that we'll talk about in these episodes is I really like the concept of like communication between percussion, especially between all instruments, but mainly between percussion. You know, that phrase of like call and response. I find like if the percussion is sort of speaking to each other, it creates a much more enjoyable experience to listen to, rather than just like the occasional offbeat cowbell or percussion or whatever. Having these things sort of have a little bit of a conversation is helps it groove, I think. So if you listen to these three ones together that I've highlighted, so it goes like but. And this is different every time, you know, it depends on what else is going on. Like we've got these chords and bass which are doing a rhythmic pattern, and then we've also got the vocal. And for each track, I'll sort of independently place these things. You know, I'll pull up something and I'll where is it there? I'll just play randomly. I'll just record a MIDI clip and play where I feel that it needs the percussion, and then I'll sort of pick the best bits and move them around and just sort of experiment for a long time until I find the right flow for the percussion. So again, this is pitched up 4 semitones. If this was just regular, like one, it doesn't feel as sort of garagey, but then it also feels like, you know, one of them's over here and then the other one's down here, and it didn't feel like the right communication again. Again, there's no rules, but that just felt right with this context. And then here we have a sort of rim, again from Splice. I haven't done anything to, I don't think. No, yeah, that's just a normal pitch. Yeah, it's just a simple little one shot. And that's pretty much the percussion. And then over here we have a sort of rogue cowbell that's living outside of that group, which only comes in on the second 8. First comes in on that second 8 of the drop. And we can see here that I've just, well, first of all, I've chopped off the, what pitch is it? 3, like there. Yeah, so originally the sound had all this sort of unnecessary reverb. I've just shortened that up. On its own, may sound kind of weird, but in the mix, it feels like, you know, right in the context of the groove. I'll often do that with the ghost snares and percussion and stuff, because if it's too long, it feels like it can sort of be dragging over the bar lines and not tight enough, you know. And yeah, then there's a little bit of soothe on that. Not hugely noticeable, but it felt like it was the right thing to do at that point, at that time. And that's panned 17 to the left. Yeah, again, not a lot of panning going on these drums, but a lot of them are stereo. I think this, yeah, that loop's got a bit of stereo going on. This noise loop is stereo. There was something that I'd done to it on the previous project that had gotten flattened into it. I think it was like a widener, or there's something going on with it. And then on the drum bus, so yeah, this is one thing that I wanted to discuss at the beginning, but we're now getting into it now, is I always like to have my things, all my tracks in groups. So we've got the keys group at the top, then we've got the kick and bass group here, this purple one, then we've got all the drums apart from the kick in this group here, then this rogue cowbell, then we've got an FX group, and then we've got the vocal group. And I kind of like all of my templates start with these 5 channels. It just sort of helps me when I'm writing. I might look in a group and see, oh, this one's missing some stuff, or I haven't done any effects. Maybe this needs effects, or maybe it doesn't, depending on the track. But it just helps to keep everything organized as well. It can help with leveling, and it's just a good part. It's become a part of my flow. I'm sure a lot of you use templates and stuff. It's pretty normal nowadays. So yeah, on the processing for that drum group, we have a glue compressor, which very, very minimal, but it's just sort of sticking them together a little bit. I like my attack times to be about 10 milliseconds. I don't like it too quick, because especially in a club when you play it, I don't want it to feel like someone's like flicking your ear. You know, it's softer sound. This quick release here, I always have it around there. You want that to be super quick, because you don't want it to be. The longer it is, you know, the longer it takes for the threshold, I guess, yes, the threshold to come back up. So if you have loads of quick percussion and hi-hats, the longer it is, it's just going to be held down, and you're not actually getting the compression. So that's a really important thing to have there. Then we've got the Magic Oxford Inflator. This is the key to all drum processing. I love it. It's just the best. You could use a saturator or an exciter. That's kind of what it does. Without it, it sounds like again, it's subtle, but in my opinion, it is doing quite a lot. This curve is kind of adjusts it from more of a soft curve to a hard curve kind of setting. You know, in its saturation, it's sort of a different level of harshness. And that effect, yes, 45.7. Yeah, it felt right. I do that on all of my this is sort of my standard drum bus processing. I'll have glue compressor, inflator, soothe, and then anything else extra on afterwards. I could have maybe, looking back, because this is something we'll talk about a lot with all the different groups, is I tend to clip or limit my groups post processing. This one here, I could have maybe done another standard clip, just chopping off those transients, the little tiny transients, which would have given me more headroom, on the master. But for this particular song, I didn't do that. Maybe I forgot to do it, but I would have definitely done that now. And then we have this endless smile thing. For those that you don't know, it's like a reverby kind of white noise shimmery effect. I'll show you. It's this classic one here. Sure, we all know that one. And that just automates on the pre-chorus. It's sort of up a little bit, and then drops down to nothing on that drop, and then it automates throughout that build-up. And then the same on the extended, you can sort of see there. That actually looks like a little bit of a mistake. Should have been maybe there. Anyway, moving on. Then we got a Pro MB, which didn't end up getting used. It's just, there's just nothing on it. Can actually just go ahead and delete that, I reckon, because there's nothing going on. And then a tiny 1.18 dB boost in that 2.5K area. It must have just felt like it needed that in the context. I'll mute it, see if it's... It's just making that clap and those mid-range hats poke out a little bit more. And that's my drum bus processing. Then here we have a bit of automation on the sections. It's sort of coming down -1.5 dB in this pre-chorus and build-up, and in the second pre-chorus and build-up. The reason for that, why 1.5, is because I like to do everything in sort of -3 increments. This is some like a big sort of mixed philosophy that I learned, which I've always implemented ever since, is if you think of things in -3 increments, -3 decibel increments, it really helps with gain staging, because I can't remember the exact science behind it, but I think it's something along the lines of it reduces the intensity by, say, like 15%, 20%, and it's like a notch rather than randomly placing things in a mix. You have some idea of like, okay, this is living at 0, this is living at -3, -9, or whatever. And so if you went from 0 to -3, that would be one scale of intensity. If you went down to -6, that would be 2 scales of intensity from 0. And so on and so forth. And so if I do things in -1.5, that's half of 3. So maybe I think I probably would have tried bringing that down 3 decibels, and it was maybe too much of a reduction in those sections. So that's why it lived at that level. And you can see maybe here with this kick and bass group, that could have maybe lived at -4. But these things aren't concrete, and obviously there are no rules, so it's just whatever feels right. But it's just a good way of keeping everything in check. Like again with this vocal, this could have just lived at 0. But yeah, you just sort of freestyle it until it sounds good. Then the next thing is this, again, just making sure, yeah, okay, cool. This next thing is the kick and bass group. So here we can see this. One of the things I wanted to talk about with this track is, looking back, I probably would have changed the kick on. I made another song shortly after this called On My Mind, which is basically the same sort of sounds. And I ended up changing the kick, and I much preferred how that kick sounded. I've got the kick saved here, actually. I could just load it up. Well, first of all, let's hear it with this kick here. If you need me, baby, tonight, I'm falling back in your arms. I'm falling back in your It's a nice round sounding kick. It was actually made on Kick 2. I made it on Kick 2 years ago. But looking back, I don't know what it is about it. It's something about, I think it is the round, it maybe feels a little bit too round or synthetic. And I think this one has somewhat of a better sort of knock. It's pitched down right now. Maybe that would have been a better kick. Minimal, but that's something I would have changed looking back. But we can't change it now. The song's out and people have enjoyed it. So it's all well and good saying, you know, woulda, shoulda, coulda done this or that. But at the end of the day, people liked it. So that's what we're working with. So yeah, we've got a little transient shaper. We've got an EQ boosting a tiny bit of that lows, and we've got an isotope. This is a transient shaper. It was really just cranking those mid and top transients. I don't think this is actually really doing much. No, it's not doing a huge amount. It's actually compressed. Yeah, 1 ratio, so it's not really doing much. Yeah, and the kick was pitched down 3 semitones. I chopped off that tail because it was sort of getting in the way. The reason for that pitching down 3 semitones, not only because stylistically it felt right, but if we look on the bass, let's just solo this for a sec. So on that root note there, you can see, I remember I tried a bunch of different settings for this, but you can see where my mouse is here, the kick and bass is sort of riding like that, which is, you know, if you don't know already, that's riding in phase. There was a few like right there, you can see and hear that part of the waveform. The grey one behind it is the kick, and this lighter grey one is the bass, and you can see they're sort of literally riding like that, and that means that they are not only playing the same note, but they are in phase. And this helps for you. Basically, as a general rule, you know, you don't want kick and bass sort of phasing everywhere. Again, you can do whatever you want, but I really like the sound of when the kick and bass are sort of perfectly in sync. And another tip with this is that if you can get it perfectly in phase, you'll notice that your root note suddenly becomes a lot louder. So overall, you can maybe make your bass quieter, or your kick and bass, if you know, it might be a reason why you're struggling to get the volume you want from your kick and bass. That could be a reason why. And I remember so maybe I could have gone a bit further. Maybe it could have lived there. I mean, it was kind of hard because the kick isn't necessarily a note. It kind of has a note. Yeah, boom. But see, then that felt a bit sharp. Like in key. That would have been slightly more. Yeah, another thing I would have slightly changed. But I mean, it's in phase enough. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be absolutely perfect in phase. But it's just something to be aware of. You just don't want the waveforms kind of dramatically clashing. Actually, sorry, I was wrong here. So you can see that yellow waveform is the kick, and the grey one is the bass. But it was mainly this part here. Another trick you could do, you could phase invert it. You could get one of these utilities here. See there. That's now perfectly. phase. Again, another thing I would have changed. Can't change it now because the song's out. But I remember with this one there was quite a rush from when it got signed to putting it out. They wanted it done quite quickly, so I may have overlooked that. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of see. Anyway, can't change that now. But that's why I pitched it. Didn't nail it perfectly, but you know, these things we learn. Then we have this EQ boosting a tiny bit sub. I remember when I started listening to it on other systems, it felt a little bit sub lacking. So that was why I did that. This isotope. It's really doing quite a lot on that mid and top end. Again, in context, without that. Feels really flat without it. So that, let's make sure that's back on. So so that's the kick. This is another kick that I tried. It just felt really, distorted. Actually not a bad kick in context, but this one was better. And then the bass is just a really simple, it was a preset. Preset from these Odyssey Evo Sounds packs. I think it's actually meant to be a drum and bass sound, but whatever. I don't think I changed any of this actually at all. I remember maybe changing the filter a little bit. Just a really nice clean sort of donk FM sound. I did a bit of EQ here. Actually no, it's not subtle in context. Let's have a listen. Yeah, it needed that. And that's the R bass. For those of you who don't know, it's a great sort of harmonics plugin. Can be a great alternative to saturation. It just really boosts the intensity of the resonance in the specific area. So this track I've chosen 134 as the frequency. I've brought down that output. No, I haven't brought that up. Maybe that could have gone there, and I could have brought it up after. But that's what we did. And then the kickstart, as you can see, that could have also probably lived at 100, but it didn't. And then there's also a Reese in the pre-choruses. I really like this patch actually because I use it a lot for writing because, well, you can't see my keyboard. My keyboard's down here, but you can sort of up in the right, you've got a strings sound, and in the left you got this Reese, and for writing sessions or whatever, it could be quite useful for playing stuff in the room. I think it's actually that. It's just a really nice sound for writing. I think that was actually when I wrote it with a friend of mine, Tim Height. I think that was the sound that we used, and then I sort of split it afterwards. And yeah, that has a little filter that kind of just creeps up. And yeah, on this kick and bass group we have this Soft Clip Pro. Again, this standard clip for those of you who don't use it. This is one of my favorite plugins. Great for managing headroom and also for saturation. So like on all of these groups, as I was saying, there's usually some sort of limiter or clipper which just tames all these transients. So again, when I'm looking at the gain staging of each group, it helps to know that like the peaks aren't reaching above that level. And a lot of the times it's very unnoticeable. Like you can, if I show you here, I mean this group is already quite heavily limited, and yeah, you can see it's flat. But for example, you could actually, let me show you before this limiter, because so this red line, these red lines here is where I'm clipping it, and I can again, it's already quite clipped before. Let me take that one off. So there, right, so here is a great example. So I'm chopping off all of this, which is probably around, yeah, it's like between -6 and -4 decibels, which are being chopped off. So, and you can't hear that. It's just, it's so quick. So if you imagine if all of your groups and all your sounds have slight clipping on, you can really save a lot of headroom and make your masters really loud. So yeah, that's a general concept. And if you have it on the soft clip mode, soft clip pro, I always do, it doesn't completely flatten them. You know, it has a bit more of a sort of soft rolling off of those transients. So yeah, so that was not on there. It was this Pro L2 and this standard clip. I also really like this slight saturation. Again, it's kind of like that inflator. I mean, let's see what it sounds like with all these plugins turned off. Subtle, but it's louder. Like it's technically, if you see on this where my mouse is on the right, that's peaking higher than that. You see the concept? So you've saved yourself, as I say, yeah, 4 to 5, maybe 6 decibels of headroom in the process, and it sounds more or less the same. Then we have this Pro MB, which is just sort of taming a bit of these low mids and a bit of the lows. I wouldn't have done that now. I tend to not like the sound of Pro MB on the kick and bass group. I would have maybe done it individually or just not used it at all and tweak the sounds to fit that. But again, that's what we're doing on this. This is, yeah, a Pro L2. Yeah, and so the rain itself, I think it's muted. Yeah, the rain's muted. But you're just getting a tiny bit of that texture. It's very subtle. It's incredibly subtle, but it's there. Yeah, and so as you can see here, it's two sawtooths, one at 5D tune, one at 6D tune. This oscillator here, I believe, is on. Oh no, it's not on that macro knob. I think at one point it was on that macro knob. It's actually not being used. So it's just one oscillator. That felt right. Then this, yeah, these effects here. At one point, I think at one point it did have, but it was doing something weird to the ends of the notes, and I didn't really like that. So then we've got a bit of this hyper dimension. I think it's just the hyper, yeah. Yeah, we didn't use that in the end. And then this reverb here. Subtle again, but it all adds up. And yeah, that's pretty much the sound. I think I tried to use this LFO for the cutoff and then ended up not using it. Use this envelope here. One thing that's quite cool is that this macro knob here, you know, you can assign whatever you want to these macro knobs, and I've assigned the sustain of that filter envelope, and I think originally this reverb mix was assigned to that, but I ended up wanting to tweak the reverb more, so I used this Valhalla vintage verb instead. And then there's also a bit of the mod 2. Yeah, so in the intro it sort of starts out a lot softer. It's almost like an organ or something. But throughout that first build and up to here, it just gets a lot more like bow bow, which is cool. We like that. So then we have a EQ, just sort of chopping off these lows. I think there's another one here. No. Yeah, subtle, but it's needed. Another thing to note here as well, just generally, is these note lengths. Something that I pay quite a lot of attention to. I feel like it really affects the groove of something. Like over here, you can hear it's held. You know, it's legato. Which was an intentional thing to sort of build the tension of that section, and also, you know, this section here after the drop, and then back into that build. And then on the drop, they all get quite short. And you can see obviously here it's got that groove pool, Logic 16th swing 63, and the notes. Again, no rule for this, but I quite like if I'm doing this sort of rhythm, for these ones here, to cut off before the kick of so that, you know, there's obviously a kick on this 1.3, 2.3, because it's on all 4 beats. It's 4/4. But like if these ones were like this, I just feel like that it doesn't groove as much as, you know, bam, but has a bit more of a pulse to it. Again, there are no rules, so sometimes you want to tie that over. It just depends on what feels right at that time. Yeah, and I've chosen these sort of that voicing for that first chord, and I think it's yeah. No. Yeah. It's a nice kind of slash chord, that. For those who are into music theory, it could. Looking back, I actually thought it was. It could have been that, or it could have been like. But you know, that's what we went with, and that's pretty much that pattern. Another thing to note is at the end of this build. You get this pedal note in the bass, so as the chords are going round those changes, I think there's a bit in the sequence where it goes. Yeah, this bit's pretty cool actually. Shout out me. What do I even do there? Bam, boom, bam, bam. Oh, boom, bam. So it goes to the major 7. Wow, what did I do? So I'm just sort of relearning what happened there. So we have a major 7 chord. What is that chord? That. Okay. Okay. Ding, ding. I don't know how I came up with that, but I did. So here we are. I think the theory behind it was some sort of, I wanted to go, when we were writing it, again, shout out Tim, is that we wanted it to go to that note. So we wanted it to sound that, but have the chord move. And you can see here that the last chord. What is that voicing? I've done something cool here. So that's basically, you could have done that, but I've decided to, again, we'll be covering music theory throughout these series. I should have maybe warned that at the beginning, but it's a nice extension as opposed to just doing a regular, sharp 5. Well, starting at the beginning of this theory, you know, on a 5 chord, let's say this is 1. On the 5 chord, you know, you can go major. But because we're having all these minor chords, and then we go major, we go up 1. If we just went there, it would feel weird. So it needs the extension. So we have a sharp 5, a dominant 7, and a root there, and this E. Again, yeah, because it's quite nice to have like an A major triad over that 5 chord. You could have also gone. It's quite Stevie sounding. Shout out Stevie Wonder. So yeah, I like that a lot. And as again, to note where I was originally going with that point is that at the end of this build, as we're getting those extra chords in, it just holds on that C sharp as it builds and builds and builds. So yeah, that is some cool stuff in there. Anyway, then we have these. It's a diva patch. I don't remember changing anything on this actually. I mean, maybe I did. Yeah, it's a diva patch from. Looks like it's the. Yeah, standalone Divine. Shout out Seven Skies. Incredible preset maker. Everything he makes is incredible. Everything he did that turns to magic. He's sick. So yeah, that's a very simple sound. It's obviously got a lot of noise, which is sort of nice. This vintage verb, Valhalla. Again, Valhalla's probably the most used reverb ever, but there's a reason, because it's great. Color on 1980s. It's got a bit more of a sort of chorusy thing to it. I would have maybe moved that up. And this is just sort of outlining certain notes in these chords. It goes up on that last one, just to kind of give it some progression. This is quite a cool little. So it's one of the chops of the vocal, but just filtered with this delay, bit of compression, and a kickstart. It's quite subtle, like. But it adds something. It fills out the frequency range in a nice way. I could have maybe turned it up even. It's really nice. It's nice to have things like in productions, I find, where stuff that you don't want everything to just feel very regular, like a piano sound and a bass sound and a drum sound. You know, it's nice to have things that are sort of a bit out of the ordinary of what you would expect for the sound selection. Like maybe in the drums there's someone like knocking on a desk or something, and it's sort of the same principle here. Like it's part of that's why it's in the keys group. It's part of the harmony, but it's a vocal sample that's building the chord, you know. So yeah, we like that sound. Then I remember I tried out this thing here, but it just made it feel too dreamy and lacking in snap, you know. So just chose to sort of keep that sound going throughout that. And then over here, that's sort of an evolution of this sound here. So again, like we were saying earlier with conversation, those two things are having a little chat. You know, it's like someone over here and someone over here having a little conversation. We like that stuff throughout. That's music. It's like call and response. If everything is kind of call and responding, it's always going to be more appealing to the ear. Yeah, and then that sound is a Rob Late. Shout out Rob Late. He makes some great patches for Serum, and he makes great everything, drum sounds and stuff. Got this reverb here which automates. It just turns the reverb off in those sections because I felt like it was hanging over and ruining the harmony of the next chord. Then we have a kickstart, a little EQ3 which I'm just essentially using as a filter. Like, you know, you can turn off this this high knob here and just use that like as a filter. It's quite a useful tool actually. Although be wary, it does something weird to the phase, but on sounds like this it's alright. Then I tried like a stutter, but it just wasn't the right sound for that thing. Then here there was these JP8 brass. But I sort of felt that it was kind of doing pretty much exactly what that was doing, and it just felt a bit cleaner without it. So that is that. Now we move on to the vocal, which is probably the most important and interesting part of this breakdown. So myself and Tim Height sat down. We started the session for this song, and I wanted to try something out which I hadn't done before. Which I tried it on a sort of rap vocal track that I'd done, but I wanted to try it out on this, where basically giving the game away is a AI vocal. So it's me through AI to sound like a girl. And there were sort of a few reasons behind this, because I felt like, for those of you that don't know, I have sort of like a lot of songs that have come out previously with me singing on them, and I kind of had a bit of a sort of a time where those songs were quite popular, and I would perform a lot of those songs singing. And I kind of preferred, after a while, realizing that I don't necessarily want to be like singing the songs like in content and in, you know, on things like this and stuff. I kind of prefer being like the DJ as opposed to the singer, even though I enjoy singing on the songs, but you know what I mean, just generally. And yeah, so I think I might have deleted the, I think to save whatchamacallit, space or whatever. So you can hear there was a harmony that we tried that didn't end up working. I really want to find you guys the original We did it on another project, I remember, because it was a lot of trial and error. Um, it was actually, that was the longest part of making the song. Was I couldn't figure out why the AI wasn't delivering me the correct vocal. It was churning out this weird amalgamation of the wrong words and stuff, and I realized that after emailing them, if you clear your cache, it will, because it holds on to the AI. The AI model is learning from things that you've inputted into it. So if you input it too many different words, it starts getting confused. So yeah, that was a whole trip in itself. But we did a lot of recording it down, in a different key, and then pitching it around. But essentially, this is the vocal here, and we made a few little tweaks.
You make me feel so warm when all of the light is gone. My feelings way too strong. If you need me, baby, tonight.
So I think here.
Need me, baby. If you need me, baby, tonight, I'm falling back in your arms.
We had originally done that, and I believe the demo got signed with it like that, actually.
If you need me, baby, tonight, I'm falling back in your arms. I'm falling back in your arms. If you need.
Yeah, it's weird. That was almost the record, which just feels weird looking back on it now. Yeah, just here, just typical sort of timing edits and stuff. We'll sort of dig more into that in other episodes, because there's not a whole lot that I've done here. It's more just very subtle. That could have maybe gone here or whatever, but yeah, it was a really fun day. Shout out Tim. He's an incredible writer. Yeah, and you can see in the intro we sort of looped this. Making sure we're still recording. Yeah. And like, I remember one interesting thing when we were writing it is when we hit those chords in that build up, he was like, "Oh, this feels so warm," and obviously he used that in the lyric. He sort of wrote the majority of the lyric on this. And I remember we sort of went back and forwards on a little bit of melody, but he kind of pretty much wrote the top line. Yeah, so you can see here. So yeah, there was this elastic pitch thing, which if I turn it off for a second.
When all of the light is gone. Back in your arms again. If you need me, baby.
See, this is what I meant about it being a nightmare. There were certain bits that it would pump out in a different format because of the different keys that we recorded in. So I ended up going through and making it all by ear the same format with elastic pitch.
If you need me, baby, tonight.
It was on these bits here.
Back in your arms. If you need me, back in your arms. Back in your arms. Back in your arms. If you need me, baby.
Yeah, it was a real trip that day. It took forever, but it's a fun trick to use if you want to maybe mess around with it and you end up sounding quite different. I think like now a lot of people have caught onto that technique and been using it themselves, obviously, but it's quite a fun thing to do.
Need me, baby, tonight.
There we have like an echoed version. And again, the whole song consists of two sections, just that you make me feel so warm, that pre, and then the chorus. Again, an executive decision to not have too many words. You don't want too many words in your club songs, generally speaking. And so this bit could have been a verse, but it's enough with just those chops. It feels full. What are these?
It's where I belong. Back in your arms.
So I think here I just didn't like
It's where I belong.
the timing or something was a bit weird on that. And then this is like basically a double, you know. I would have usually done left and right, but it took so long to get this lead vocal to do what it needed to do, so I just used one other vocal and put a micro shift on it to sort of replicate that effect of a double. Subtle, but it works. And then this was quite a cool part, was these harmonies that come in. Yeah. Could have melodined those, looking back. Definitely could have melodined those. But again, it was one of these ones that took so long to get these AI vocals acting correctly. Now I would have known about the cachet thing, but we didn't. And they just accent these nice parts of the, like, it's the melodies. On the 7th, and there's one of the harmonies goes, need me baby tonight, need me baby tonight, I think it was baby, baby. I remember we had a long debate about that. Baby, it could have gone baby tonight, but that felt a bit too baby, baby tonight. I don't know, something about it didn't feel right as opposed to baby, baby tonight. Felt a bit more like minor. Baby tonight. I don't know, something about it felt weird at the time. Baby tonight. Baby tonight. So we got. That was why, is I wanted to hold this sort of triad shape. I think. Baby tonight. Baby, baby tonight. Baby tonight. No, it doesn't do that. It's a bit of a nightmare figuring this one out. It just felt right. I don't know why, but I feel like I'm wasting time here, but I feel that's one of my favorite parts of the song. Just like, feels good, feels hot. Little chop there, another little chop over here. Just a looped bit of audio. And then on this group, we've got a whole bunch of just like verb and delays automating in that first build, and at the end just felt like the right thing to do, you know, for those build-ups and pre-choruses and stuff. You want it to be spacey and getting all a bit weird and interesting, and then nice and dry on those drops. Again, also a filter being automated on that intro part. Little bit of Pro and B, just taming these. I tend to always do that on vocals. You can sort of never get enough Pro and B on vocals, I find. We'll do another episode on that because the vocal processing on here was in another document. So anyway, kickstart on that basic setting on 100%. And we've got this endless smile, again doing a similar thing to that keys group, just on the beginning part. And a little boost in this 2.2K and 6K. I'll just show you without. yeah, it needed that kickstart. I just fiend for kickstart in those situations. Then we have the effects group. Really not a whole lot going on here. There's this laser sound. The soothe is really helping. Love that sound. Crash, my favorite crash. Yeah, just I don't know why. I remember this is from another song. I spent a long time processing that and getting it nice and crisp and brittle, and love that crash. This is an entire effect stem from a song that I made. It was came out with Strange Fruits, and it was a remix of Calabria. You can go look that up, but it's basically literally the entire effect stem from that song. I'll just turn it up for a second. It's got like an applause in it, all these rises, white noise. Yeah. Again, another thing of, you know, bouncing down sounds from previous songs and bringing them in is a really big part, because that would have taken me maybe an hour to make, you know, getting all those sounds tweaked and whatnot. And I can just drag it in. You can see here originally it has this little huh sound. But that got chopped because it didn't really feel like the vibe of this one. Can't even hear it anyway, it's just in the way. And then there's this nice little noise shot here, just while we're on, just on the start of those little. That could have been louder actually, but it wasn't. Then this serum, I tend to make these little kind of dub siren-y-esque sounds. They're quite fun to make. I'll just take a sine wave and this LFO, and I tend to map this to just waiting for it to come back up to this. I've got like a keyboard which has a bunch of macro controllers, and I'll map that rate. Yeah, you can see I recorded the information of it speeding up and slowing down. Oh, they're just so much fun to make. And then I've got this delay on it, and this warp. I don't know if that ended up getting used. Yeah, it does. Towards the end of this, oh, so much fun. It brings in the sync mode, which, you know, just adds more harmonics and takes the sound from just being a pure sine wave to sort of bringing in these other parts of that waveform, almost turning it into like a sawtooth. That was sort of the idea, to sort of, you know, boost the highs towards that end bit, and then it pitches up again right on that end. Yeah, have fun with making those. They're some of my favorite things to do. Again, an FX stem from another one of my songs, which I've imported in. A little Cashmere down sweep. I mean, this is all basic stuff. Excuse me, that you guys, I'm sure, know already. And then, yeah, and then that is the FX group. Again, so this could have lived, if I was being really picky now, this vocal could have lived at 0. This effects could have lived at -7 or whatever. But this just felt right in the balance. I mean, I'm talking about in referring to my rule of like -3 decibel increments and stuff. These keys had some automation on the group, just turning them up basically on the drops. And that is pretty much the song, with the master, a little bit of a low cut, little standard clip. mean, we sort of discussed this before, but I'll just go over this briefly. So on this Pro L, you can see if I don't have the standard clip, if you watch this, watch these levels here, or this red level here. So for a start, it's distorting quite significantly, but it's also it's distorting, and the limiter is struggling to contain these peaks. Whereas if this is on, there's a whole -3.5 to -4 decibels that are being chopped off before it goes into that limiter. So the limiter does not have to work anywhere near as hard to contain and boost the mix. Really, really useful stuff to remember. And again, I'm using that same Pro L2 setting, essentially a clipper setting, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, didn't feel like it needed a whole lot. And that's the song. I've got it turned down -5 here because I'm recording this breakdown and I need it to be there so you can hear my voice over the top of it, but that was at 0. And yeah, that is In Your Arms. We'll just run a little bit of it again just because why the hell not? Let's do this bit over here. See there, that was one little detail just while we're there, is that white noise stem shot goes from being on that second half of that drop to on this one it holds for a full for a whole bar. No, half a bar. Just what I think that's the only thing. Oh no, there's a few different things that. Okay, so we're nearly done. That cowbell starts to come in there on that second drop. And that white noise has gotten longer there. Very subtle differences on the first and second drop. Again, that open hat layer. It's nice to not introduce too many new things on the second time around. If it's just subtle and you don't even realise that it's getting bigger, but it is slightly getting bigger, is generally a good practice to maintain on your songs and development of production. So, let me bring this back over here. And that is the full In Your Arms breakdown. I hope you guys enjoyed it. That was really fun. Yeah, let me know in the comments what other songs you want me to break down, whether of my own or other people's, and I'll try and do the best I can to provide for that. But yeah, okay, thanks a lot guys, peace.